Chapter 7. Not many weeks ago, I was starting a bedridden day in a state of acute powerlessness and quite rough pain. As I lay unable to move but braced from past experience, I heard a soothing and capable voice saying, "Now, you might feel just a little prick. Be assured, male patients have exhausted all the possibilities of this feeble joke within the first few days of hearing it." And almost at once I felt reassured in a different way, because that voice and that expression and that little pang meant that the pain would lift and my limbs straighten and my day begin. And so it proved. What if, though, as I once semi-consciously thought as I lay in similar distress, that friendly voice had had just the faintest hint of a taunt in it? What if it had been saying, in the merest possible way, "This won't hurt much"? The whole balance of power would have been violently subverted, leaving me defenceless and petrified. I would also instantly have to wonder how long I could coexist with such a threat. The torturer's intricate work would have begun. I stress intricate, because torture isn't really a matter of sheer brute pain and force. As I found out when I was actually a torture victim, it is above all a matter of subtle calibration. How are we doing today? Any discomfort? This is made additionally problematic by the tendency of modern medicine to fall back on the use of euphemistic words in any case, the polite evasion of the weak discomfort being one of the most salient of these. Another avenue of euphemism is laid out by the planned and coordinated approach. Thus, one might hear the question, "Have you met with our pain management team yet?" Once you've heard it the wrong way, this can seem like an echo of the torturer's practice of showing to the victim the instruments that will be used upon him, or describing the range of techniques and letting these threats do the main part of the job. Galileo Galilei was allegedly exposed to this while undergoing the graduated pressure that eventually squeezed him to recant. I became a torture victim because I wanted the readers of Vanity Fair to have an idea of what was involved in the sordid and obscure controversy about waterboarding, and the only way left, or left untried, was to offer myself to this procedure. Obviously, there were limits to the authenticity of its infliction, and I had to be in some sense in control of the setting. But I was determined, as far as possible, to discover what a waterboarded person really undergoes. With the help of some very serious former Special Forces personnel who knew that they were breaking American law on American soil, I arranged an appointment in the hills of North Carolina. Before we could even begin, I had signed a legal document indemnifying them in case they killed me by the infliction of physical or psychological trauma. A stronger word there. What happens, you may have been told, is a simulation of the sensation of drowning. Wrong. What happens is that you are slowly but inexorably drowned, and if at any point you manage to evade the deadly drip of water, your torturer will know. He or she will then make a minute but effective adjustment. When I interviewed my torturers later, I was particularly interested in this aspect of matters. "Oh yes," they said, with mild bragging, "we have lots of little moves and shakes and twists that will get the job done and not leave a mark." Again, you note this pride in technique and its almost humanist tone of professional expression. The language of torturers. The reason I have decided to write about this in the present context is as follows. Ever since I composed and published the original essay, which was some time before I was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, I've been suffering from some form of post-torture stress that probably has yet to be classified or named. In my own case, at any rate, it has to do with asphyxiation, and the aspiration of moisture can trigger a flood of panic and has become imbricated with the larger and deadlier symptoms of my various pneumonias. And every day I'm forced to prepare myself to be tube-fed through an apparatus of liquid nourishment, or to be washed to different degrees of immersion, or to be otherwise made highly vulnerable. So I'm very fortunate indeed that I have never had to hear the torturer's odious whisper, or to shrink at the thought that I am only a wrinkle or a twist away from severe fear and distress, a word quite high on the euphemism scale. But I do now know how the trick could be pulled. I've been cycled through various great American hospitals in the course of my experience, at least one of which is famous for being operated by a historic religious order. In each of the rooms of this hospital, from no matter what perspective you lie in bed, the commanding view is decidedly that of a large black metal crucifix embedded tenaciously in the wall. I had no special objection to this on one level because it really did little more than repeat the name of the hospital itself. I tend not to pick my fights with the chaplains' departments until I have a proper point to make. In Texas, for instance, in a purpose-built brand-new facility that took the towers to the level of more than 24, I got them to agree in principle that it was slightly idiotic not to boast of a 13th floor, but instead to skip from 12 to 14. Surely nobody checks in here to complain of cosmic fears generated by a number, or would check out because of it. We seem, incidentally, quite unable to discern how this dank little superstition ever got started. However, I also happen to know that it was a practice during the wars of religion and the campaigns of the Inquisition to subject the condemned to a compulsory view of the cross until they had died. In some of the fervent paintings of the grand auto da fe, or acts of faith, not, I think, excluding some of the burnings alive captured by Goya on the Plaza Mayor, we see the flame and the smoke arising from the vicinity of the victim, and then the cross itself held grimly aloft before his closing eyes. I have to say that even if this is now done only in a more palliative fashion, it makes me feel disapproving on the grounds of its earlier sadomasochistic associations. There are banal quotidian hospital and medical practices that remind people of state-sponsored torture. In my own case, there are also practices that I can't separate from the hell of earlier ones. Even the thought of some misapplications of water or gas, such as a moisturized or nebulized breathing treatment kit, can be more than enough to make me feel critically ill. When I was first thinking of a possible title for this book, I considered annexing the line "Obscene as Cancer" from Wilfred Owen's terrifying poem about death on the Western Front, Dulce et decorum est. The action describes the reaction of a group of exhausted British stragglers caught in the open during a gas attack, for which they are ill-prepared. "Gas! Gas! Quick, boys!" An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling, and floundering like a man in fire or lime, dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his hanging face like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud, of vile incurable sores on innocent tongues. My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori. When I, too, am sometimes forced into premature awareness by a smothering or choked nightmare sensation, I realize how essential it is that the frontiers of medicine be so tightly and punctiliously patrolled. I appreciate that within the profession itself there be not the least concession to any relaxation of that standard. The operators of that famous hospital should be ashamed of the historic role played by their order in the appalling legalization and application of torture. And I have the same right, if not duty, to be equally ashamed of the official policy of torture adopted by a government whose citizenship papers I had only recently taken out. Chapter 8. Publisher's note. These fragmentary jottings were left unfinished at the time of the author's death. Remember, you too are mortal. Hit me at the top of my form, and just as things were beginning to plateau. My two assets, my pen and my voice, and it had to be the esophagus. All along, while burning the candle at both ends, I'd been straying into the arena of the unwell, and now a vulgar little tumour was evident. This alien can't want anything. If it kills me, it dies, but it seems very single-minded and set in its purpose. No real irony here, though. Must take absolute care not to be self-pitying or self-centred. Always prided myself on my reasoning faculty and my stoic materialism. I don't have a body, I am a body. Yet consciously and regularly acted as if this was not true, or as if an exception would be made in my case. Feeling husky and tired on tour? See the doctor when it's over. Lost 14 pounds without trying. Thin at last, but don't feel lighter because walking to the fridge is like a forced march. Then again, the vicious psoriasis/eczema pustules that no doctor could treat have gone too. This must be some impressive toxin I'm taking, and a mercy for sleep purposes. But all the sleep aids and blissful doses seem somehow a waste of life. There's plenty of future time in which to be unconscious. The nice men with the oxygen and the gurney and the ambulance very gently deporting me across the frontier of the well, in another country. The alien was burrowing into me even as I wrote the jaunty words about my own prematurely announced death. Now so many tributes that it also seems that rumours of my life have also been greatly exaggerated. Live to see most of what's going to be written about me. This too is exhilarating, but hits diminishing returns when I realise how soon it too will be background. Julian Barnes on John Diamond. A bout de souffle, Seaburg/Belmondo. Funny how one uses breathless or out of breath so casually. At Logan Airport, can't breathe. Next stop, terminal. Tragedy. Wrong word. Hegel versus the Greeks. Morning of biopsy. Wake and say whatever happens, this is the last day of my old life. No pretense of youth or youthfulness anymore. From now on, an arduous awareness. New Yorker cartoon on obit pages. Used to notice death dates of Orwell, Wilde, etc. Now maybe as long as Evil in War. Amazing how heart and lungs and liver have held up. Would have been healthier if I'd been more sickly. Prayer. Interesting contradictions at the expense of those who offer it. Too easy a Pascalian escape hatch, with me on the right side of the wager this time. What god could ignore such supplications? Same token, those who say I'm being punished are saying that God can't think of anything more vengeful than cancer for a heavy smoker. Nose hairs gone, runny nostrils, constipation and diarrhea alternating. The old order changeth, yielding place to new, and God fulfills himself in many ways, and soon, I suppose, I shall be swept away by some vulgar little tumour.